Welcome to the Pastor's Connection podcast, where we delve into the heart of ministry and explore the challenges and triumphs of pastoral life. Join us as we connect with inspiring leaders, share insightful stories, and equip one another with tools for effective ministry. Together we can foster a community of support, encouragement, and growth in our calling. I am your host, Thomas Osterkamp. I lead Beachside Community Church here in Palm Coast, Florida, as well as the Pastor's Connection Network. Today's episode is brought to you by Family Meeting. The Family Meeting exists to help you have the meaningful relationships that you desire in your marriage and family. Along with the podcast, Thomas and Lysander offer books, devotionals, as well as speaking at marriage retreats and conferences, providing real, practical help for ministry families. Contact them at info@familymeeting.org to help the marriages and families in your church grow stronger today. Today's episode, I think, is going to be an interesting one for you. Certainly very timely with what is going on in our world today. We have with us Yi.lee. He is an immigration attorney and the founder of Olive Branch Immigration Services. Yi, so glad to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Thomas, for inviting me here.
So today we're going to be talking about ICE and the church. I know that we have had some questions come up in our community group, and we'll get to some of those questions here in just a little bit. Yi, before we jump into the conversation for today, would you mind just introducing your family to all of our people who are watching and listening?
Yeah, my name is Yi.lee, and I'm an immigrant from China. I immigrated from China to the United States in 1989. And I've always had an interest in immigration law because I was a beneficiary of a much kinder immigration policy back in the late 80s. And it was an immigration policy that allowed me to become a U.S. citizen, take part in the U.S. Process, and become a member of society that I was able to contribute. And so immigration law is something that I enjoy practicing because I get to help people like me go through this process, and I know both the practice end as well as the beneficiary's experience end as well. So the two sides. And I feel like I have a lot to offer to immigrants that are kind of facing challenges right now during the current administration. I am married to Rachel Lee, my wife. We go to Christ Community Church in Daytona Beach. I have my parents here as well. They're also immigrants from China, retired professors, university professors, but they live in DeLand.
Okay,
So
cool.
just our small family unit in Florida, and trying to make a living and work and trying to help out people. We're making an impact where I live.
Well, what's so great is that you have that experience. You can identify with what people are going through. Yi, how was the immigration process for you? What do you remember about that as you made your way to the U.S.?
Well, I had a really funny one because I immigrated to the United States when I was really young. So my parents came to the United States when they were international students back in the 1980s. My father came in 1983, and my mom came in 1985. This was like the really early times for immigration for Chinese nationals. Our country, China, just opened up after the Cultural Revolution, and so they were the first wave of immigrants, highly educated, actually, immigrants that came to the United States to seek, advanced degrees, master's degrees, PhDs, and things like that. So they got here first, and then they were going to try to bring me as a dependent of their immigration status. They're F1 international students at the time, so I would have been considered F2. I was 8 years old at the time. Of course, everybody assumed that, an 8-year-old boy would just do whatever the parents tell them. But, if you remember when you were an 8-year-old boy, you kind of had your own thinking, and
For
you
sure.
didn't necessarily want to do what your parents wanted you to do. So I remember going to the consular interview for my visa. And nowadays when you go to the consulate for a visa, you take a number, you sit in the seat and with 30, 40 other people there's big, thick, bulletproof glass and everything. And the interview is like 2 minutes, 3 minutes long. Back in 1989, I was the only person in Shanghai in the U.S. consulate interviewing for the visa that day. And I
Wow.
went into this consular officer's uh, office with his plush carpet. First time I've ever, seen a room with carpet before. Um, and then on the walls there were decoration of like U.S. animal, like wildlife animals that I've
Uh-huh.
never seen before, like owls and stuff. I'm like, oh, this is a kind of cool place. But at that time, I already made up my mind that I didn't want to go to the United States. And so there was this consular officer. He was a redhead American, but he spoke perfect Mandarin. And in perfect Chinese, he asked me, "Little boy, why do you want to come to the United States?" And I told him right off the bat I didn't want to go. And so he says, that's easy. I'll refuse your visa.
Oh boy.
So I got my visa denied. The first time I interview, and my parents were really livid.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah. And so, but at that time, my parents had friends that were connected with the U.S. Senate, Senator Lautenberg of New Jersey. They were able to have the senator call the consulate and basically say, I don't care what that boy says, bring him over here, get him the visa, right? And so I would like to say that I came to the United States against my will, but it's one of the best decisions that I never made.
Yeah.
And incidentally, today, the senators cannot have, they cannot affect any decision the consular officers make. It's not like back then, the
Yeah.
senators have some weight and pull. But now there's a doctrine called doctrine of consular non-reviewability. Is basically whatever the consulate's decision is the decision that stands, and no congressman, no senators can actually make that change. So that's really different these days.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Man, I can't imagine at 8 years old moving to a different country. Like, I moved here to Florida almost 4 years ago with my
yeah,
four daughters, and they didn't want to move across the country, never mind around the world. So,
yeah. I didn't speak any English at the time either, so that's why I was like, no, I don't want to go. It's kind of scary for me. I don't want to do this.
yeah, no kidding.
That's
Yeah.
why I said no. And yeah, but anyway, didn't do me any good. Got the visa anyway. Got on the plane. Came to the United States.
And you probably heard about it from your parents when you got here?
They were really excited for me to be here. I remember on the plane, two things that were introduced to me that I'd never seen before. One was salad.
Oh,
I thought
really?
it was gross because in China, because of the way that agriculture was back then, you couldn't have raw vegetables. You would get sick if you ate that
Okay.
because they used like animal waste to
Oh,
fertilize all the
sure.
crops, right?
Sure.
So I thought that was disgusting. I thought salad was disgusting.
I
And
still
then
do.
you still do. I eat salad from time to time. But the other thing I discovered that I really like was butter. I've never seen butter in my life,
Wow.
and so my 8-year-old mind said, "This is really good. I'm going to save some for later." So I stuck it in my pockets.
Oh, no.
And then when I got off the plane, my parents came and greeted me. They were very excited, and they're like, "Why are you so greasy?" And I realized that the butter melted in my pot. I didn't know that, butter would melt like that. I've never seen
Yeah.
it before. So, but yeah, my introduction to the United States.
That is
So the,
really funny because, like, as a Midwesterner, like we grew up with butter everywhere, so it's just fascinating to think about it from an outsider's point of view.
right.
Well, I'm thankful that you and your family did immigrate here to the United States. I appreciate what you're doing for others who are trying to make their way to the U.S. And obviously, there's no doubt that we are in a very volatile time for immigrants. And, um, you know, not being a political podcast, being more of a ministerial podcast, we won't get into all the policies one way or another as far as what has got us into where we are today. But I think we do need to have a conversation about the current legal framework surrounding ICE raids. Like I said, we've had some pastors who've reached out through the network to gain some information. So can you kind of explain to us what rights do individuals and by extension church communities need to understand about the current situation?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you a little background.
Okay.
Before this administration, all the other previous administrations, churches were historically considered off limits to immigration enforcement because they were considered sensitive space, right?
Sure.
And so that has tied in with the First Amendment right to religion, because if you start enforcing, immigration matters in churches, it directly influences the ability for the churchgoers to practice their religion. And so the previous administrations tended to stay away from churches. If they were able to arrest or stop undocumented migrants, they do it somewhere else, not the church. Church was considered sacred space.
Right. Which is, it's policy, right,
Policy.
but not law, right?
It's not law. It's policy, definitely. So under this current administration, they say, well, we're going to do away with that. Churches are fair game. And basically, under the Trump administration, they say, the authority is to go into the ICE can go into the church if they have reason to do so, or probable cause. And so churches now have become kind of a target for some of these ICE raids. And I don't know if you've had experience yourself, but you said...
No, not here. We haven't, but I do have friends that have had ICE show up to their facilities.
Right. Well, now schools, hospitals, churches are places where ICE can come into, but even when they can come into churches, there's still a delineation between what's considered a public area as opposed to a private area in the church, right?
Right.
So lobbies, parking lots, waiting areas, maybe even the sanctuary considered public space that they can go into, but not the private areas such as offices, children's ministry. We still have expectation of Fourth Amendment right to privacy. So, there's still places that are off limits in churches that for ICE to come in and to make an arrest, they still need to show for those private spaces. They need to show, a warrant that's executed by a judge.
Right.
The public spaces, though, the standard is if they have a reasonable belief that there's a probable cause to make an arrest, then they can come in and start questioning people, which is sad to see because of this kind of target on churches now. You have traditionally perhaps undocumented migrants that were faithful churchgoers. Now they're relegated to staying at home and not being part of the community because of the fear.
Right.
Next time they show up to church, they're going to be put in cuffs and put into detention, put into expedited removal, put into deportation.
So does it matter, say, if you post signs literally right out on the doors of the church or right next to it saying private property? Does that change if it's posted, it being a public space or not, or counted as a public space?
Well,
do you know?
Yeah. So, and here's this situation. There has been some litigation over the ICE raids on churches. The most recent case I found was 2 months ago in April. A federal judge in District of Columbia refused to grant an injunction for ICE raids, saying that there's no violation of the First Amendment right to privacy or the First Amendment right to religious practice because, and I think it's kind of a legal stretch, but her rationale was basically, even if we were to reverse the policy back into the previous administration's policy, it would not guarantee undocumented migrants to go back to church because they're going to be hiding out anyway, and they want to avoid ICE anyway.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can post the signs for public, or private space, but if ICE does show up, to your church and they're showing up as in their official capacity to carry out raids, I would have the church staff challenge them,
Okay.
right, and be able
Yeah.
be say, well, do you have probable cause that they're undocumented migrants in our public areas in our church? And if you want to go into the private spaces or offices, you can't without a warrant, and it can't be signed off by an ICE official. It's got to be signed off by a judge.
Right. The difference between a judicial and the other.
Right. So
Okay. So talking about, been touching a little bit on the legal grounds here. Are there legal grounds that exist for churches to offer sanctuary? How solid are those protections? Are there risks that ministry leaders need to be aware of?
Well, sanctuary is not recognized by federal law, nor is so-called sanctuary cities, right?
Right.
And so, I mean, it's not really enforceable to offer those type of protections. But I understand the nature of churches is to offer, you know, kind of sanctuary for all people, whether we don't consider their immigration documentation when we're helping our congregation with their spiritual journey or providing
Exactly.
for their daily needs, right? So I say that even though sanctuary, the concept of sanctuary city, the concept of offering sanctuary is not something that's upheld by federal law, I would say that I still encourage church and the pastors and the people in the ministry to offer help to these migrants if possible, because a lot of times they're looking for whether it's a place to stay, whether they need help with groceries, things like that.
Yeah.
Is it's something that the church exists to do, right? Because this is something that Jesus asked us as believers to help those in need.
And the sad thing is that many of these people are some of the most taken advantage of.
Yeah.
And so there are an overwhelming amount of ministry leaders who are, I've never asked anybody for their documentation. It's like, hey, you need some food, you need some help.
Right.
That's exactly what we're here supposed to be doing. So
Even the Old Testament, I was looking at Leviticus and all that, and God gave some very specific instructions to treat the sojourner as you would treat the your own, because you were also slaves out of Egypt.
Yeah, which is an absolutely great point. So what are some practical steps that churches can take to prepare their congregations legally and pastorally for potential ICE activity?
Yeah. If ICE does show up at your place of worship, I would recommend all churches to study up on the laws and regulations and have the congregation, especially the undocumented migrants, to know their rights, right? So,
Okay.
For example, if ICE goes to their house, don't open the door. They can only come into the private space with the properly executed search warrant. If they're questioned in public, don't open your mouth. Don't say anything. If they have attorney representation, give them the contact for the attorney, and let the attorney take care of it.
Okay.
Because ICE cannot effect arrest unless they deem there's a probable cause that they are dealing with an undocumented migrant. Right. Now,
Yeah.
the very fact that ICE uses a lot of tricks, and of course the very fact they can justify their arrest. Well, the very fact that they threw out the attorney card or they refuse to talk to me, I have reasonable cause to believe that they are undocumented migrants, and therefore I'm going to go ahead and detain them for removal.
Mm.
But yeah, in all situations, it is better to not say anything and get the immigration attorney involved.
So I know that later on we're going to talk about how if people want to contact you and get your contact information and your website and all of that. But you talk about educating yourself. Do you have suggested resources? Do you have things that you can give to people who are
Yeah.
looking to try to educate themselves a little bit?
ACLU has some really good stuff in multiple languages too. I was just on their website. I can give you the link to that,
Oh, that'd be
along with my
fantastic. And we
website
can,
as well.
okay, cool.
Yeah.
We can put that in the show notes for those who are listening to be able to just get there and get a little bit more information. That would be excellent. So when we're talking about educating people themselves, we want all people to know their rights, how to be
Right.
able to protect themselves and represent themselves. So when we're talking about like whether it's know your rights session or something like that, what are some of the elements that should be included for undocumented individuals or families who are affiliated with a local church? How can we help them educate themselves as well?
So the community is very important in times such as this. So if you can gather with your undocumented congregation and share the information regarding their knowing their rights. Basically, if they're able to, if you can print out know your rights cards in an easy to carry, like an index card or something like that, that they can keep on their persons, that would be very helpful in
Okay.
whatever language that they're fluent with, English, Spanish, whatnot. Getting the community involved to know their rights, know the capabilities of ICE and CBP. Customs Border Protection is another agency under the Department of State, or I'm sorry, the Department of Homeland Security that does a lot of these raids. And you might not know, but CBP has jurisdiction also for inspection raids within 100 miles of the border, of the international
Okay.
border. And because Florida is a peninsula that's surrounded by water, all of Florida is under the jurisdiction of CBP as well. So now with
Oh, I didn't
Florida,
know that.
yeah,
Interesting.
with Florida, you have not only ICE to contend with, but also potentially CBP as well. And they both have the authority to detain and to deport and to remove undocumented migrants. So
Well, and I think it's not just about making sure that undocumented migrants understand their rights, but
right.
you know,
What about U.S.
American
citizens?
citizens as well, who somebody looks at them and just assumes, and
Yeah.
I've seen this happen where it's like, no, I'm a U.S. citizen, like making sure that they know their rights as well.
I have a T-shirt that says "Relax, I just look illegal." I don't know if that's
Yeah.
cool or not to wear, but I just came back from a trip from China and Taiwan, and I was wondering if I was thinking, should I go through CBP with that shirt? Probably not.
Probably
But
not.
here's the thing with U.S. citizens, right? You
Yeah.
have no obligation or legal obligation. You have no legal obligation to carry proof of your citizenship. So
Right.
Thomas, you don't have to be walking around with your birth certificate. I don't have to be walking around with my naturalization certificate. And that has led to some instances in the past where ICE detain Puerto Ricans,
Yeah.
right? And or there was another incident when they detained some Navajos because they just didn't look like your average white American.
Right.
And they didn't have proof on themselves to prove that they were U.S. citizens. So, they had to. I think the Navajos had to go back to the reservation to get their res cards to prove that no, we were here first before you guys.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, but for anybody that's not a U.S. citizen, they have the legal obligation to always carry proof of legal status in the United States. So if you're here as a lawful permanent resident, a green card holder, you should keep your green card on you at all times. If you're here on a non-immigrant visa, like a F visa or a J visa, you should have your passport, your I-94 showing that you're here on authorized stay. You're here with an authorized stay of duration of status. H-1Bs, same passport. I-94 to prove that you're here lawfully. Unfortunately for our undocumented friends, they have no proof of that. They can't
Right.
carry around. You can't produce something that doesn't exist. So
Yeah.
for them, carry the Know Your Rights card, the attorney card, if they ever get into a pinch, let the ICE agents talk to the attorney first.
Okay. So I know a lot of people who don't look like me, I guess I'll just put it that way, are choosing not to travel outside the country
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
I know you just traveled. How was the experience for you going and coming out of the country?
Well, my experience was okay. They had the standard questions that they asked me, and then they just said, welcome home, sir. And I was very courteous to the officer as well. But I noticed that when I was entering, you have different lines. You have citizens and permanent residents, and then the other line is non-citizens, non-permanent resident immigrants, right? So those with visas. And I was obviously with the citizens line, and I was in line with this older lady who was also a U.S. citizen. And I overheard her say, "Oh, my friend is in the faster line because she has global entry." Okay.
Yeah.
And so I thought to myself, global entry is one of those things where if you are traveling in a party, the person that has a global entry can take the other friend to the front of the line and to be expedited.
Right.
But she didn't know that. So as we were waiting in line, her friend goes to the front of the line under the global entry, and they ask the friend some questions, and then they find out that she had the global entry card holder had a friend that's waiting in the regular line with me, right?
Yeah.
And that lady her name was Nancy. So the CBP officer very, very sternly steps out in front of all of us. So, is there a Nancy here? I need a Nancy to step here immediately.
Jeez.
And this is a U.S. citizen, right? So, and everybody is terrified because this is the current administration. CBP has all the power. And so this elderly lady, Nancy, steps out with deep concerns on her face. Like, oh my God,
sure.
what did I do wrong? Only for her to be escorted to the front of the line, and then the officer saying, okay, you can go. Right?
Oh, wow.
So here's the thing is the CBP has lots of jurisdiction to do a lot of things like searches without warrants, right? If they want to search your luggage, you can't say, well, you need a search warrant. No, not at a port of entry. They have the power to search your luggage without a search warrant. But what power do they not have? They have no power to prevent a U.S. citizen from entering the U.S.
Right.
Okay? So they cannot stop a U.S. citizen from entering the U.S. They have to let you through if you're a U.S. citizen.
Right.
Okay. So, but he wanted to, I don't know what the purpose was, but he wanted to show his strength.
Yeah.
And then make
intimidation.
Make her a little terrified in front of all the other U.S. citizens.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, like, I have traveled out of the country under multiple administrations, and I don't know what it is. Like, even I'm nervous as I get in the line and get ready to come back in. It's like, I don't know what it is, but yeah, no reason to make it worse.
Right. I've heard of in the past that they were giving immigration attorneys, even though they're U.S. citizens, kind of hard time and grief because we work on the other side of the aisle.
Sure.
But I did not experience that this time,
Good.
But for lawful permanent residents and non-immigrants with visas, it's even harder. Right now, I'm advising all my clients that are going through the green card process not to travel.
Okay.
Traditionally, when you're applying for a green card, you can apply for what's called advanced parole. That allows you to travel while you're waiting on your green card. I'm telling people not to do that. I'm telling people not to travel even to Alaska, Hawaii, Virgin Islands, because you're flying over international waters. What if the engine fails and you have to land in Canada? You just departed foreign. That causes problems. Even domestic travel now, ICE agents waiting at the CBP and ICE agents waiting at the gates, trying to catch undocumented migrants. So that's not even domestic air travel didn't seem to be so safe anymore.
And better for them to safe than sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
And a lot of times the migrants, the lawful permanent residents, they don't know they don't know their rights. They don't know the law. So,
Right.
and they don't know the trap. So before they talk to me, they make the trip, and then they come back and they have problems,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, yeah,
Which makes sense because, like, if I traveled, to China, I don't know what the situation is there and what to watch out for and everything else,
hmm
And so the same thing for people coming here is they don't necessarily know, even though they're doing it the lawful way.
yeah,
So, um, as pastors and ministry leaders, we often have people who, tell us very confidential things.
hmm
And so I'm thinking about these pastors who have had members of their congregation who have told them things like maybe it is I'm here illegally or whatever else, I am undocumented. How can churches handle confidential information that's shared during pastoral care or legal clinics without risking exposure to ICE?
Well, it's privileged communication, so they have no obligation to share with ICE, unless there's some sort of, maybe if they were subpoenaed, then maybe, right? But
Yeah.
traditionally, privileged conversation stays privileged, right? What if a pastor comes in contact with a congregant that is undocumented and they need some legal help? Well, um, you would delineate and draw the line where the pastor would immediately try to shift that communication from the pastoral role to the undocumented migrant to a to refer them to an immigration attorney immediately.
Yeah.
Then the immigration attorney will take over and handle the case, right? And then that's good because the church community can have that function where they can talk with undocumented migrants that are in their church, and if they need help, be that referral source to help them find legal help or immigration attorneys like me to help with the case. But usually that's where the pastors, their role in advising on legal matters would stop, right? They
Right.
shouldn't be advising on legal matters, but
No.
if
Yeah.
something's disclosed to them regarding immigration, immediately, if they have connections with immigration attorneys, seek out the immigration attorney, refer them, and let the immigration attorney handle it.
Okay. I was just kind of wondering if that would be covered under the confidentiality. So you're like, there's no reason if somebody tells me, for instance, if I'm just, and this is all speculatory.
hmm
So if somebody comes to me and says we're talking, counseling, whatever else, and they happen to tell me they're here undocumented,
Right.
there's no reason for me to go and to let anybody know about that. There's no legal obligation.
None. For
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure of that and let our ministry leaders kind of understand that as well. And you kind of touched on this a little bit. So the kind of the line between pastoral care and getting involved in legal advocacy.
Two different things. Yeah.
Yeah. So where do you think that line is drawn, and how should they balance that out?
Yeah. So the line is drawn when the church member notifies the pastor regarding their status, and they might have a question: what can I do to fix my papers or to try to become legal in the U.S., right? And
Yeah.
then that's when the pastoral care portion ends, where the pastor can refer the case to the immigration attorney, and then the attorney would be able to handle the case to kind of do a consultation where they can diagnose whether the church member can have a legal pathway to a green card or some other benefit, and then
Okay.
have the immigration attorney handle from there. Yeah.
And this is, something that growing up and, going to seminary and being educated and trained to pastor and lead a church, immigration status is something that's never covered. And so we're often aware of resources for housing and medical
Yeah,
and food and all that stuff, but
the
I was
pastor can
never
still
told.
do that, even if
Yeah,
they're even if the churchgoer is going through the immigration process. If they come back to you and say, "Hey, I'm going through the immigration process with the attorney, but I still need some help with food, housing," um,
yeah,
that the pastor can help with that.
yeah. And
Yeah,
but here's the thing: I was never taught is, hey, you should know an immigration attorney
right,
for people. Because here's the thing: no matter where you are ministering as a pastor, or you're watching this, or you're listening, um, there are people all around you who are going through this, and so being able to recommend somebody now, we're going to get Ye's information as I mentioned earlier, so that if you are looking for somebody, you need somebody, he would be more than glad to accept that referral and have those conversations. But that ought to be one of the resources that you understand. So if one of your parishioners comes to you, and whether it's on purpose or
right.
happens to tell you I'm undocumented, you can say, "Hey, that's let me refer you. I've got somebody that you can talk to."
Like if the member comes to the pastor and says, I have this health issue and I have this heart issue, the pastor wouldn't say, well, I'm going to start giving you this type of medical care. They would
Right.
just refer to the doctor as well. So it's the same analogy.
Okay.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
But make sure you know somebody, and if you don't know somebody, Yee's right here.
Yeah,
He'd be
and there's
glad to help
always
you with
good,
that.
there's always good resources. American Immigration Lawyers Associations is our um, practice association. There's many chapters all across the United States. Very good
Okay.
attorneys doing this type of work. So it doesn't just have to be me, because a lot of your colleagues that are in California that are experiencing these type of raids, they probably need a immigration attorney closer in California as opposed to in Florida. And
Sure.
so, I, if I can't help, I can definitely refer some of my colleagues in California in those states as well. I'm very
Excellent.
happy to help. Yeah.
Excellent. And that's the thing is like I know you, Yee. I know the type of person you are. I know the follower of Jesus you are, and so I highly recommend you and whatever references and recommendations that you would give to our ministry leaders. Um, and so let's talk about maybe the partnership between churches and legal advocates during an ICE raid. What does that look like? What role can volunteers play as these things are playing out across the country?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really tough right now because the ice raids come unannounced. So if you're going to have a strategy in place, you want to do it quickly and beforehand, before any type of situation would arise. Um, a lot of times churches now do their streaming. It's not no longer just in person for the worship and teaching, right? You guys do
Right.
streaming too, right?
Yes, we do.
So that's a way for undocumented to still take part in activities without having to expose themselves, to actually being out in public. Um, like I said, like being at church could expose you to ICE. The number one
Yeah.
thing that exposes people to ICE is driving, right? Uh,
Sure.
Unfortunately, undocumented people are just like you and me. They need to make a living, and so they're out there driving to their jobs, driving to the grocery store, and the chances of getting stopped by police is very high. You can have a taillight out, you can have a
Yep.
registration number expired, anything like a little bit of speeding, running a stop sign. In Florida, it's extremely also, more perilous too, because the local constabulary forces, like the police, now are also mini ICE agents. When they can stop you, they can also make referrals to the immigration officials. So
Mm.
that's something very concerning too. So the biggest thing about these things, planning for your church to kind of strategize on how to protect your undocumented churchgoers, is education and knowledge, and making sure that everybody has access to those resources and have a coordinated plan in case something does go down. Having that potential contacts for attorney representation just in case if they need it. Those are very important.
Okay.
Yeah, very important.
And you'd mentioned live stream. That was one of the we had somebody in our group who was asking a question about, what could they do for not necessarily just those who are undocumented, but my lawful migrants who are like nervous about just going out and going to church now. And so one of the
Yeah,
things I recommended is like, hey, have them gather together at their house, watch the live stream, and hey, as a pastor, you provide discussion questions to your sermon so that they can have a conversation and kind of walk with each other spiritually during a time where they're, because of what's going on, they're nervous about walking in the doors of a church.
yeah, yeah. That's absolutely right. I mean, I sometimes get nervous too because I have a funny first name. Um,
Yeah,
I'm not white. My Canadian friends, clients can get away with more things immigration-wise than sometimes I think I can because uh, I do feel like immigration enforcement is traditionally more geared towards on the racial line, more towards Latinos and uh, Africans and things like that. So it is kind of racially profile driven in a sense
sure.
too. Uh, yeah. So
Well, and it's one of the things that I grew up in Iowa. I did not grow up in the cornfield. I don't know anything about farming. I grew up in the city, in the worst neighborhood in our city, second largest city in Iowa, which is not huge, but
what's the city?
Cedar Rapids.
Okay.
So I grew up in Cedar Rapids, and our community was very African American where I grew up. My next door neighbor, best friend, African American, and this is my personal experience. I don't know how many times I got pulled over when I had my friend in the car with me.
Mm,
When he wasn't in the car with me, I got pulled over never.
right.
So like it's something that has been going on for a long time for a certain population, and it's they become an easy target, I think, for a lot of people, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
So
true.
I understand that. I understand why there would be some hesitancy about gathering together if you are a certain ethnicity, that you might become a target even if you are here lawfully. Um, so I think we have a responsibility to leverage our voices, to try to advocate for those who need help. So, what do you think are some things that churches can do to leverage that voice? Maybe it's commenting on immigration policy, issuing statements, joining coalitions that have integrity. Like, what are some thoughts that maybe you can give to those pastors out there who are looking for a way to make a difference?
Communicate to your churchgoers that no matter what their background is, they're still value human beings, and in the eyes of Jesus, they're the sons and daughters of God. They're availed due process. That's another thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's very important because a lot of times I see online discussion, especially, and here's the thing. I'm a little conflicted because when you're dealing with church, you're dealing with typically more conservative members that tend to vote the conservative way.
Sure.
And so I have talked to some friends that have expressed a little bit of remorse for voting for, and I don't want to get too much into politics, but voting for the current
Yeah.
administration because they
Sure.
felt like, well, the campaign promise was to target not just the undocumented, but those that are criminals in the U.S. Right?
Sure.
And that's essentially the previous administration's policy. There was a doctrine called um, that they would only enforce immigration on those that were terrorists or criminals.
Yeah.
It's called prosecutorial discretion, meaning we don't have enough resources to go after everybody. So we're just going to deport the ones that are actually real criminals in the U.S., right? Not
Right.
the ones that are working and paying taxes. The IRS treats undocumented migrants as permanent residents for tax purposes, right? Because the
Right.
IRS wants the undocumented migrants' income.
Yes, they want the money.
They want the money. They're not going to get Social Security back, but they definitely want them to pay into it.
Yeah.
So most of my clients are like that. They're hardworking. The only crime they ever committed was violating the Immigration Nationality Act by coming here illegally or we call it entry without inspection, EWI.
Yeah.
Or overstaying their visa or working without authorization. But other than that, they're peaceful people and contribute to their community and model members of society. So in church, I find a lot of people that voted for the current administration, and then come to find out, wow, this administration's going after everybody, not just the criminals. They're going after even visa overstays, people that have been in this country for many years, with even U.S. citizen children, that are born here.
Yeah. Well, and people who maybe just because of oversight or not paying attention or whatever,
Right.
they are here longer than they were supposed to be.
Right.
Yeah. Or maybe just didn't renew. I mean, I think everybody across the board would agree on the fact that, hey, we need to get rid of those who are committing crimes, murder,
Sure.
rape, all that kind of stuff, right? And so we expected that to happen for sure.
And what about the kids that came over when they were 2 years old, right? Their parents brought them over here without inspection across the border. They never went back home. They might not even speak Spanish or their native language. They don't remember what the home culture is. And so they didn't make the decision to come to the United States. Their parents did.
Right.
Right. But
Right.
they're also subject to deportation back into a country where they know nothing about. Right?
Yep. Yeah.
And that's why Obama had the DACA, the Deferred Action for Children, that was instituted, had a little bit of a protection for a class of people that are, the younger children that came in this way. But it was only for a season, and that's no longer in effect. So those people that came when they were 2 or 1, very young, didn't make the decision. Their parents did.
Yep.
They're also suffering the consequences.
Yeah. And I think it's important for us to remind people that all of us, hey, we want grace and mercy.
Yeah.
I mean, we are in ministry. Those who are listening to this, you're in ministry. You're leading churches. You're helping people spiritually. We have experienced the grace and mercy of our Savior.
Yeah.
And we are called, I'm not talking about breaking the law or any of those things.
Right.
I'm talking about, but we are called to show grace and mercy to the people who are around us.
Right.
And so I think it's important for us to keep that in mind in the way that we interact with all people. And it'd be nice if Christians show a little more grace and mercy on some of the online conversations, as you mentioned as well.
Speaking of that, the online, a lot of Americans, they have the false notion that because you're here illegally or undocumented, then you don't have access to due process.
Right.
So you don't get a court hearing, you don't get a court day, you just get deported, right? And their argument is because you're here illegally, you don't get to enjoy the constitutional amendment protection that U.S.
Right.
citizens get, right? But that's absolutely not true. The 14th Amendment states very clearly that those people present in the United States have the right to due process. And,
Yes.
and it's been long upheld by the Supreme Court that says present in the United States doesn't mean that you have to be legally present. If you're present in the United States, whether it's legal or undocumented, you're availed those due process rights. Okay.
Yeah. Which is a great reminder.
Yes. So that's why we exist, to help them have access, help that marginalized population have access to that due process.
Yeah.
They deserve a day
excellent.
in court, right?
Right, exactly. I mean, they are a human being who is present in the United
Right.
States. And so, as you reminded us, they deserve the due process. And, I mean, it's required in our Constitution. But, yeah, I've seen the same thing, where same comments, same stories, rhetoric. So, amid the fear and uncertainty of the ICE activity that's taken place and probably will for some time, what biblical hope and encouragement do you believe churches can offer families and communities who are under stress right now?
Just to remind them that Jesus loves them and that the church is as the bride of Jesus reflects God's glory and also love them too. For every one of my clients, I pray for them before I work on their case, because right now it's really stressful.
Yeah.
You have this administration that's trying to trap them, trying to deny their due process rights. And so if the other side is not really following the law, how am I going to do my job effectively, right?
Yep.
And so I need God's favor, I need God's protection, I need God's mercy for all of my clients, because it's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah. And it's not just undocumented, people who are under fear and stress. We have lawful citizens who are feeling that fear and stress as well. And as ministry leaders, we ought to be sharing that source of hope and peace and calm and love and grace and mercy to all of our parishioners.
It's more relevant now than ever, I would say. God's message is always relevant, but now it seems to strike a even more immediate chord with me.
Yeah. And it's as horrible as the things that are going on are, it is a great opportunity for churches, for Christians, to show the true love of Jesus to a people who are struggling right now. And so it is a great opportunity for all of us to stand up and say, hey, this is what the true church looks like. This is what followers of Jesus look like. Right. And we're going to love you. We're going to encourage you. We're going to help you during a time where there is a lot of fear and a lot of stress going on.
It's very interesting, but the church tends to expand and grow during periods of persecution. It has always been the blueprint of the Jesus' church to grow during the tough times. The easy times, maybe not. So the tough times is where God's grace really shows up, even though these are trying times. And I feel like Jesus gives us an opportunity to grow during this time, and there's some things that we can experience as a church, namely the grace of Jesus that we don't necessarily get to see during the peaceful, easy times, if you will. Yeah.
And that's such a great point, because I think of the church in Iran right now, and we won't get into that whole situation, but Christians are under severe persecution there, and the church is literally growing. I don't know if it's the fastest anymore, but at one point it was the fastest growing church in the world because of what was taking place. So it's been a great conversation today. Yi, where can people connect with you if they have questions or they need some more information about immigration law?
They can reach out. Best way is via my email, yi.lee at olivebranchimmigration.org. That's yi.lee at olivebranchimmigration.org.
Excellent. Okay. And we'll put a link there to your website and that information in the show notes as well, so that people can reach out to you. If you need to reach us here at the Pastors Connection Network, you can do that by going to pastorsconnectionnetwork.com or finding us on Facebook at Pastors Connection Network. Yi, thank you so much for your time and input into our conversation today. It's been great talking with you.
Hey, it's great talking with you too, Thomas, and thank you so much for leading a church and being a pastor. We really appreciate what you and your colleagues do, especially during this time.
And thanks for joining us on the Pastors Connection podcast. May you be inspired and equipped to lead with grace and purpose until we meet again.